I'm the Executive Director of Investor Advocates for Social Justice. Welcome to our webinar where you can learn about our work, hear from some of our staff and board members and a few of our affiliates about how we work, what we do, and how you might become involved. To get our conversation started this morning, I'm going to turn to Brother George Schmitz. I'll let folks know that we'll answer questions and answers at the end of the session. This session is being recorded and we'll share with everyone who's in attendance and post it on our website and encourage you to share it as well. Thank you again for joining us. You can feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box and we'll address those at the end. So now I'm going to turn to Brother George Schmitz, who's the chair of our board.
Thank you, Mary Beth, and good morning and welcome to everyone to this informational webinar about the work of advocates for social justice. I'm a member of the Congregation of Holy Cross and one of 37 IASJ affiliates. IASJ is a new organization with a long history, so let me explain that seeming contradiction. In the 1970s, many Catholic religious congregations of men and women began to organize coalitions for responsible investment. We did this throughout the country. And we here on the East Coast were known as the Tri-State Coalition, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, along with other East Coast coalitions. We were unincorporated, and the members carried out most of the work under the direction of an executive director. With the aging of the membership of Catholic religious orders, we decided that it was time to take steps to assure that our work continued, because we saw our work as a vital part of our mission. As shareholder activists, we are proud of our work on behalf of human rights, racial justice, and the environment, and we want to see it continue and thrive. With the guidance of Mary Beth Gallagher, our executive director, and assistance from consultants, a task force met several times in 2019 to create a strategic transition plan. The result was the incorporation of Investor Advocates for Social Justice as a not-for-profit, New Jersey-based organization. And over the past 20 months, I'm happy to say, we have seen our work thrive. We brought together a strong, diverse board of directors, and each of our board members is enthusiastic and dedicated to our work. The purpose of this webinar is to introduce you to the work of IASJ and to highlight some of our recent successes and to encourage you to consider becoming an IASJ affiliate. We're committed to expanding our affiliate base beyond New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And we also want to go beyond our current concentration of Catholic church groups. Today's presentation will be led by our staff members, Mary Beth Gallagher, our executive director, Gina Falada, our program associate, and Julianne Lyons, our other program associate. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We'll have some time at the end to address your questions. And as Mary Beth said, this session is being recorded so that you can share it with anyone in your network who might be interested in learning more about how IASJ supports investors in aligning their investments with their values. So I will now hand it over to Mary Beth.
Thank you so much, George. So I'm going to go ahead and just share a few slides about our work to help orient you to what we do and how we do it and how we can help support faith-based institutional investors in aligning their values with their investment approach. As George said, we have a long history of advancing this work that started as the Tri-State Coalition for Responsible Investment. We're members of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility and partner closely with other CRIs throughout the country. You can see here one of our CRI meetings held with Mary Knowles Sisters in Ossining, New York, with our former executive director, Sister Pat Daly, pictured here speaking at a shareholder meeting, and our team here below. And really our work is to support our affiliate base in activating and actively using their investments to advance their values. So our mission is to advocate on behalf of a community of investors whose faith-based values promote human rights, climate justice, racial equity, and the common good. Throughout our organizational transition, we realized the importance of addressing racial equity was central to our ability to advance all of the other issues that we work on. So at that time, we made a strong commitment to increase our own work on racial equity internally within the organization and through all of our shareholder advocacy work. And this is still part of our values and is something we're dedicated to doing. Our vision is an equitable economy where investors leverage their collective voice and resources to advance social, economic, and environmental justice. One thing that I really feel proud of our work is that we work to seek collaboration and build relationships with civil society partners, with workers, with environmental activists, with social justice organizers who are doing the work to understand the impacts of corporations in their communities and looking to make change. We try to demonstrate respect and accountability through those relationships and lead with integrity on behalf of our community. We advance responsible investing strategies that may be familiar to you. We work on helping investors to integrate environmental, social, and governance into factors into their investment decision-making through our mission-aligned investment program. We engage in dialogue with corporate executives on behalf of our affiliates. So IASJ does not hold shares. We're not an asset owner ourselves. Our work is really on behalf of the investment portfolios of our affiliates and clients. We draft and file shareholder proposals, which are voted on at companies' shareholder meetings, an opportunity to advance concerns around greenhouse gas emissions, peace and demilitarization, and respect for human rights, and bring them before all of a company's shareholders. My colleague Gina will talk about our proxy voting service, where we support institutional investors in voting their proxies in alignment with their values. We attend annual shareholder meetings of companies, many of which have been happening virtually this year due to COVID-19, which has actually enabled greater participation while it's had impacts on the quality of participation as well. We organize and draft investor letters that we send to companies, really looking at the issues of concern that are on the horizon, timely issues where an investor point of view is really needed to connect with companies and encourage them to be more accountable. We weigh in on public policy advocacy, as we did just this week, submitting a public comment to the Securities and Exchange Commission on their climate-related disclosure guidance. We help investors to revise their investment guidelines and screens, thinking about sectors or business activities that they want to make sure are not part of their investment, such as nuclear weapons, tobacco, or alcohol. And as more attention is being brought to the climate crisis, thinking about whether or how an investor should be divesting from fossil fuels. I'll briefly highlight our 4 primary initiatives, and all of our affiliates are invited to participate in these initiatives. The way we work is that we have identified these priorities. One is shifting gears, where we're engaging the automotive industry on human rights, climate and dignity, where we're looking at integrating a human rights lens into companies' climate actions, racial equity and immigrants' rights, where we're looking at companies that are connected to the immigration enforcement and migration crisis and encouraging them to center human rights and racial equity, and peace and demilitarization, where we're addressing risks with business practices and relationships with the Department of Defense or other governments where their companies are making and selling weapons that put communities and society at risk. So as we work, we've identified about 50 companies that fit within these 4 initiatives. And we look at our affiliates' investment portfolios. They're welcome to share just where there's overlap or make their whole portfolio available to us to look at where there's overlap with their issue areas of interest or their holdings. And we invite them to participate in our dialogues. Our staff is really equipped at researching companies, disclosure platforms, emerging best practices, identifying where there are negative impacts happening on the ground associated with companies. And what our goal is to try to use our voice and shareholdings and leverage to engage in a productive, constructive, respectful dialogue with company leaders encouraging them to either improve their practices or disclose more information to the public and their investor base so that we might understand what their impacts on the ground are and encourage them to make progress. So our work, again, is on behalf of the portfolios of our affiliates. Affiliates are welcome to participate in corporate dialogues or serve as filers or co-filers of shareholder proposals. If they want their portfolio represented, but they're not able to participate in a dialogue themselves, they can authorize us to represent them in those engagements. And really the goal is to help enable, facilitate, encourage as much participation as possible. In these areas, again, were identified with the input of our current affiliate base. There are issues that are shared concerns among our community. And as we continue, we will reevaluate these and how they align with people's areas of interest. And there's always an opportunity to add other companies or issues that we're seeing as important emerging topics. Our work has garnered significant attention in the media. I highlight here just a few of the press clippings of recent shareholder engagements, where our work with Tyson Foods related to workers' rights and human rights is identified, engagements with Wendy's on worker health and safety amid COVID-19, surveillance technology with Amazon, and as representatives of faith-based institutional investors committed to advancing social justice, I'm proud that we center the voice of stakeholders and really take steps to put issues on the agenda before companies, such as surveillance and the impact on communities of color, relationships with police departments or immigration enforcement, and call them to change their practices. We've seen significant outcomes in the form of companies adopting policies or making business decisions not to move forward with certain contracts. And so we feel like our voice as investors grounded in social justice really helps to advance corporate accountability. I'll talk briefly about our mission-aligned investing program, which we've recently established, the goal of which is to equip institutional asset owners with the knowledge, tools, and frameworks necessary to integrate their values and environmental, social governance factors into their investment decisions. This is not about engaging with companies, but really engaging with one's own portfolio and thinking about how their investment policies and guidelines, relationships with asset managers and where they invest reflect their values and commitment to social justice. We're holding monthly cohort meetings and one-on-one sessions with our affiliates as needed, and topics include fiduciary duty, refreshing of investment guidelines and investment policy statements, how to address climate change through one's portfolio, tools and resources for impact investing, and engaging with financial managers. So this program is underway with philanthropic support, and we found that there's a really robust conversation that we're able to support between CFOs, treasurers, investment committee members of our affiliates. I'm going to share now a brief testimonial from one of our longtime affiliates, Sister Ethel Howelly. Okay.
United Nations as our NGO representative. I am Sister Ethel Howelly, a school sister of Notre Dame from the Atlantic Midwest province. About 12 years ago, I was called upon to represent our sisters in the work of corporate responsible investing. Prior to that, while at the United Nations as our NGO representative, I often heard the expression, corporations really rule the world. Yet I was not prepared to address corporations, nor did I fully understand the extent of their impact on the environment, nor their impact on their workers and their families. Through my connections with members of other religious congregations and their lay employees, through Investor Advocates for Social Justice, or its predecessor, Tri-State Coalition for Responsible Investment, I began to grasp the impact of corporations on our climate, its labor force, our healthcare, our economy, and communication systems. I joined experienced members in dialogues with companies our congregation shares. I became familiar with the forced labor issues, child labor, harmful working conditions, and many tiers of labor involved in producing a product. I learned about fracking, fossil fuels, methane gas, pipelines, and their impact on our common home, along with the recommended policies for safeguarding our planet. Investor Advocates for Social Justice has enabled me, along with other members, to look at individual industries through the workings of several companies within the industry. For example, the automobile industry, the defense industry, or fossil fuel industry. Investor Advocates for Social Justice has also led us to begin addressing emerging issues as they come to the forefront of our news, such as racial equity, gun violence, and COVID-19. The School Sisters of Notre Dame, since our last chapter, have been called to educate, advocate, and act in collaboration with others for the dignity of life and the care of creation. Investor Advocates for Social Justice enables me to do just that.
We're really grateful to Sister Ethel for sharing about her partnership with us and our work. And I hope it gives a little bit of a flavor of how we seek to support investors in their work to think about how their mission and values align with their investment approach. The work is highly technical at times, and we feel like we're able to really support institutions in actively participating in dialogue by providing them with research, resources, tools. Ethel has also been doing this work for years and years and has a lot of experience to share. So now I'm going to turn to my colleague, Gina Fallada, who's going to share about one of our key campaigns, the Shifting Gears Initiative. Over to you, Gina.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Hello, everyone. My name's Gina Fallada, and I'm a Senior Program Associate with Investor Advocates for Social Justice. I've been with IASJ for 5 years now, and have enjoyed collaborating with our investor affiliates, fellow staff, the board, and partner organizations to work on advocacy issues that I'm passionate about, including on worker rights, racial justice, peace and demilitarization, and more. I help lead a long-term shareholder advocacy campaign at IASJ called the Shifting Gears Initiative, focused on engaging major companies in the automotive industry about respecting human rights in their operations and global supply chains. Several of the raw materials used to make a car, including rare minerals such as cobalt used in electric vehicle batteries, are linked to risks of child labor, forced labor, and hazardous working conditions, while workers in automotive plants have faced labor rights issues, discrimination and harassment, and also workplace health and safety issues. We launched the Shifting Gears campaign in 2018, starting with investor letters to 23 companies, including major automakers you'd recognize like Ford, General Motors, and BMW, seeking to initiate dialogue between investors and company executives with the intention of advancing corporate action to respect human rights. Companies were extremely responsive to the letter and our requests for dialogue. We've established constructive, long-standing engagements with many companies. And where additional pressure was needed, we filed shareholder proposals to bring greater attention to human rights concerns to the level of the board and company shareholders. Now in our 4th year of the campaign, our engagements have had measurable positive impacts on corporate practices in the sector. IASJ has helped many companies develop or revise their human rights policies and supplier codes of conduct. We've advised companies on the benefits of conducting a human rights impact assessments and have seen leading companies implement this in practice. And overall, we've seen stronger corporate disclosure on human rights practices improved across a large number of our Shifting Gears focused companies. IASJ demonstrated leadership in engaging the automotive industry on human rights. We are now seen as a sector expert. In June 2020, we published the first comprehensive benchmark assessing auto companies on human rights, policies, practices, and disclosure, and our report helped influence research and benchmarks by other organizations such as the Corporate Human Rights Benchmark. Staff have been invited to speak at major industry association conferences to present to companies about our assessment of risks in the sector and investor expectations. We've also taken steps to establish meaningful partnerships with global NGOs addressing the root cause issues on the ground affecting workers and communities impacted by the sector. And throughout the years, affiliate participation has been critical to the success of the Shifting Gears initiative, bringing the faith, voice, and perspective into dialogues, filing shareholder proposals, and facilitating connections with partner organizations. And these are all influential ways for faith-based investors to join us in this work. Thank you.
I will turn now to my colleague, Jillian, who's going to speak about our climate and dignity work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Lyon. I've been with IASJ for almost 3 years now, and I help lead our climate and dignity initiative. So I'm going to share a little bit about that. Climate change is a huge issue that's affecting all of our daily lives. Individual lifestyle changes to combat climate change are important, but recent reports have exposed that just 100 companies are responsible for 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and more than half of global emissions can be traced to just 25 corporate entities. So we all know that corporations play a big role in the climate crisis, but also need to play a big role in transitioning the economy to a low carbon future. As faith-based investors, we're really compelled to look beyond just emissions and take a holistic approach to climate change, examining what it means for our communities, for those who are the most vulnerable, and people who are marginalized in our society. A lot of people like to say that the environment can serve as an equalizer, but that's actually not true. Impacts like rising sea levels, natural disasters, and pollution are not distributed equally. Burdens tend to fall on those who contribute least to the problem and are least equipped to deal with the consequences. So the Climate and Dignity Initiative was founded from this desire to look at climate change as a human rights issue. We know that companies are emitting greenhouse gases, but we want to look at where these emissions are happening. Are they in wealthy, white communities with access to green space and renewable energy? Or are they in environmental justice communities, communities composed largely of people of color that face disparate pollution and political disenfranchisement? The Climate and Dignity Initiative looks at who is bearing the burden of our climate and aims to ensure that our climate solutions are also equitable. So IASJ affiliates chose 8 companies in the utility, conglomerates, chemical, and mining sectors who not only have large greenhouse gas emissions, but also have disparate impacts on people of color, on marginalized communities, and climate vulnerable regions. So to give a little bit of an example, one company that we engage has a nuclear plant in Georgia in a community that is already burdened with historical radioactive contamination. Cancer rates in those fence-line communities have increased significantly since the beginning of the plant's operations, while the national rates for cancer have decreased. Notably, cancer rates for Black residents are disparately higher than for white residents surrounding that facility. So affiliates join or are represented in an array of shareholder advocacy activities with the goal of encouraging these companies to take account for and mitigate their impacts. A common tactic we use is holding calls with company executives to talk about specific impacts, lift up community voices, and encourage change. The Climate and Dignity Initiative was launched in October 2020, but we are really building on decades of climate leadership from faith-based institutions and investors. The initiative is inspired by the Catholic climate encyclical Laudato Si, but joins a broad movement of faith traditions working to care for our common home. You've heard about the impact of shareholder advocacy from our Shifting Gears campaign, a bit about peace and demilitarization and racial justice work. Momentum is really building for corporate change, and IASJ is proud to support our affiliates in carrying out that legacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jillian. And again, just how our affiliates participate. Jillian has conducted research on each of the companies, and we invite our affiliates to participate in dialogues and companies or shareholders in that are already in their portfolio. And having their participation and voice in our work helps us to center the commitment to social justice and faith communities as part of our history and ongoing work. I am going to turn back to my colleague, Gina, who's going to speak about our proxy voting work. So over to you, Gina.
Thank you, Mary Beth. So IASJ offers an additional mission-aligned proxy voting service for IASJ affiliates and other faith-based and values-driven investors. Each year, shareholders in public companies have a right to vote on business items such as the approval of the board of directors and executive compensation. And ensuring your proxy ballots are voted in alignment with your values is an important part of being a responsible investor. Investors seeking support on proxy voting can engage IASJ as a partner to vote proxies on behalf of your institution. We vote all proxy ballots using in-house voting guidelines that incorporate faith values and align with emerging environmental, social, and governance trends. Our staff has years of expertise assessing corporate disclosures to make informed voting decisions on behalf of our many clients. To give an example of how we apply our mission-aligned voting guidelines, can offer an example on the value of board diversity. When we assess board of director candidates, we look for companies to have representation of at least 30% women and 25% people of color on the board. When companies meet this criteria, we vote in favor of their board of director candidates, while we would vote against the director slate if they do not meet this criteria. Advancing racial justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion are mission priorities for many of our clients, and we ensure that this comes through when we vote proxies. Another important governance item we advocate for is responsible executive compensation. We assess the compensation of company CEOs and other top executive officers and vote against approval of the compensation package if the total compensation is greater than $10 million. Mission-aligned voting on compensation-related proposals is one way for investors to weigh in on concerns about income inequality, as pay ratios between the average employee wage and CEO pay continue to rise. Finally, supporting shareholder proposals on environmental, social, and governance concerns through proxy voting is a critical shareholder advocacy tool key to advancing change at companies. And this includes supporting shareholder proposals filed by faith-based investors, including proposals led by our own IASJ affiliates, as part of our campaigns on human rights, climate justice, and racial equity. IASJ's proxy voting service offers an efficient and affordable way for institutions to manage their proxy voting responsibilities. We vote using a digital platform hosted by Broadridge called Proxy Edge that allows us to vote proxy ballots and generate helpful reports about our voting practices for our clients. IASJ offers annual or quarterly billing and reporting, and the billing is based on the number of companies voted for your institution. Our proxy voting clients have assurance that proxies are voted in alignment with their values, and those who previously voted proxies on their own have found that our service frees up time to work on other responsible investing or mission activities. And please get in touch with IASJ to learn more about our proxy voting service. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. And Gina and Jillian lead our proxy voting, and they've just finished a really busy season where they vote like thousands of meetings. We bring on seasonal part-time support to help carry that workload, but really appreciate Gina and Jillian's expertise and diligence in voting. I'm going to turn again to a testimonial from one of our affiliates, Sister Margaret McGee from the Franciscan Sisters of Allegheny, New York.
Sister Margaret McGee. I am the Associate Congregational Minister for the Franciscan Sisters of Allegheny. As a congregation, we have been involved with IASJ since around 2014. Sister Gloria Old is our representative, and she is liaison with IASJ for our Finance Committee and our leadership team. For many years, we, like you, have been committed to socially responsible investing. which is documented in our financial guidelines and policies. Our values and mission priorities reflect not investing with companies which have a predominant orientation toward war, alcohol, tobacco, racism, sexism, or other products opposed to our Catholic teaching. I feel that our work with IASJ and Gloria's focus, that we have become more attentive to these and other issues that need to be raised and brought into greater dialogue. I've witnessed this in our finance committee meetings. As members receive Gloria's reports, there is always an attention to how does this information and action align or impact our investment guidelines. I find that there is great dialogue around these critical issues, justice issues, and the concern to review and discuss for further updating and action. Our investment guidelines are not just written on paper. They become more of a process that the Finance Committee and our congregation engages in. Our recent involvement with Wendy's is reaffirming our need to use our voice and to join with others so more voices can be heard. Our work with IASJ to file the shareholders' proposal on human rights called us to use our presence and our voice to engage in dialogue, listening without negativity, and speaking in a way that companies and corporations might hear our values, the dignity of human life, upholding the rights of workers, calling them to wake up to the evil of human trafficking and the exploitation of workers and other issues in new and different ways, to engage their conscience and hopefully their hearts for change. The other great benefit for me is growing our collaboration and solidarity with those who are marginalized, oppressed, or simply become a piece, an object in the corporation's mechanics and operations. Human dignity, integrity, and ecological justice are all part of this ongoing and critical work. And we are grateful to Mary Beth, Gina, and Julianne at IASJ for their guidance and their leadership.
Thank you, Sister Margaret McGee, for sharing that really kind and generous testimonial about our work and how we partner with them. We're grateful to have the opportunity to support and partner with institutions that have a commitment to leveraging their investment portfolio in the way that Sister Margaret has just described. To share a little bit about our affiliate benefits in more detail, they include participation or representation in the collaborative shareholder advocacy campaigns that you've heard about today. One can join the mission-aligned investing cohort where we support primarily treasurers, CFOs, finance committee members, and thinking about how their mission and values can be further reflected in their investment approach. We send a newsletter about every 2 months and have an annual meeting, which used to take place in person. We'll do that again when it's appropriate. And this year we held it via Zoom, and it was actually really successful and nice to be together with folks from around the country who otherwise had more challenges attending our meetings in person. And we partner, you can partner with investor networks like ICCR, the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, with which we work very closely in our shareholder advocacy work alongside other faith-based investors and groups like Ceres. Gina described some of our client services of proxy voting. We also work with some investors who aren't affiliates, but want to develop a customized shareholder advocacy initiative or a work plan, and we participate in their investment committee meetings and represent their shares in their engagements.